him out of the car and she drove off and left him there. But, he got fined by the police because you're not allowed to do that. So that's why kind of a little bit of a other
Double
side
whammy.
story of like the complete other opposite of it, right, Tyler? The complete other opposite.
I
Yeah.
don't condone violence. Please don't throw men out of cars, moving cars. Thank you. But that
They
was
probably
funny.
just he probably just they had an argument. I think they stepped out. She threw him out of the car and then closed the door and then just left. And
And then he
that's when
collects a fine.
and then he was trying to walk and I'm okay. And then sure enough they find him.
Okay, well, here's Jeff G just found a very unusual kind of, speaking of travel anomalies, a BBC article that I'll pin to the top of the room, this is a really weird one.
Yeah, so I was just going to tell you.
Okay, here it is. It says, the captain of a Turkish flight aborted takeoff at Israel's airport, scheduled to depart from Tel Aviv, after passengers of the flight received images on their phones of a plane crash. Israel's aviation authority said the aircraft was taxiing at Ben Gurion Airport, that's the main airport in Israel, when the incident happened. Passengers and crew were taken off and the luggage re-inspected. Several young Israelis were identified as suspects and are being questioned. The plane departed 5 hours late after being cleared to leave. The Boeing 737, that should send alarm bells, with 160 passengers on board, was on its way to the takeoff position when passengers alerted crew that they had received the photos. The captain was informed and decided to return to the terminal. A news site in Israel reported that the images were shared via AirDrop, an Apple service which enables users to send files from one Apple device to another across short distances, meaning somebody else on the plane sent those photos to those people. All the images were received on iPhones. Yeah, well, that's how AirDrop works. The pictures included images of a Turkish airline plane which crashed in the Netherlands in 2009 and another plane which crashed in the US in 2013. Passengers were told they could reboard the re-inspected plane, which was headed to Istanbul, or stay in Israel. Oh, gee, what a difficult choice. The incident came 2 weeks after another security scare at the same airport, which happened when a family from the United States produced a live artillery shell at check-in. I remember that story, although we didn't read it.
We did read it, and that was okay.
Yeah, that was totally ridiculous. Yeah, they found it in Golan Heights, as I recall, and they took it to the goddamn airport and threw it down on the X-ray machine belt. I mean, you have to imagine what a hilarious comedy scenario, the tragic comedy that is, what a dark comedy that is, because you can't sneak in. That is the most difficult airport in the world by far to try and sneak in anything. And here you have these American tourists who went, gallivanting around the, Golan Heights, found some live artillery shell the size of like a large football, and decide to bring it. They want to take it home and stroll with it through the airport in their luggage, pop open their suitcase as it was going through the X-ray machine, and they discover this live artillery shell. And assuming, oh, what's the big deal? I just want to take this thing home and put it on my fireplace mantle, as a keepsake, as a souvenir from Tel Aviv, from...
Not the sharpest tools in the shed.
Jesus Christ.
I guess they were American.
Yes, that's the most American visiting Israel story I've ever heard. That story is going to be told for thousands of years.
One of the things here, I did actually look at the grenade, and it's a 120 millimeter grenade, and it has a 3 kilo warhead. And the thing is that if that would have detonated on there, falling off the stove at home, it would have obliterated the house. It would actually left a crater after it. So, yeah, congratulations. Darwin Award here.
I'm not even... that story will literally be told for generations. That story is like, that's just, you just tarnished the image of Americans in Israel for generations to come.
One of the things here for the rest of the channel, for those who have never been near Israel or their airport security, as Tyler says, they are very, 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 let's call it detailed in their background checks, as well as going through all the equipment. And the thing is that there was a couple of airplane bombs on Israeli airplanes, and they said that this is never, ever, ever going to happen to us again. So actually, what happened on 9/11 wouldn't have happened on an Israeli airline at all, because you couldn't get a thing about, couldn't get even a needle on board these planes, even way before 9/11, Johan.
Yeah, they're savvy in ways that we won't know about for years to come in their profiling of folks, and long before they even get to the airport. And you know, it would be great to see like an expose, investigative, journalism documentary about the security measures around that airport. And I have an anecdotal auxiliary story related to that. The prime minister, former president rather, of Israel, Shimon Peres, spoke at an event I was like the executive producer of, or co-producer, what have you. And that was happening in downtown San Francisco around 2009 or 10. And it was at really downtown central San Francisco. The Israeli Mossad agents started arriving on the scene at the location a month prior, and they were on scene throughout, surveilling nonstop for weeks leading up to the event. And they had people camped out undercover all over the place all the time, watching for people planting bombs. And they had people on the roofs in camouflage with snipers everywhere. And then leading up to every single person who got within a 3-block radius of the place had to go through a metal detector. And it was just unbelievable detail and thoroughness, and the background checks that they do on folks. And then, like you said, anyone who goes through that airport has a sense of how much detail is going on, but in reality, there's probably 10 times more than the average traveler even realizes is going on in their investigation of everybody going through that airport. And especially the people going in and out of like Bethlehem, which I did go to when I was there. And they know every one of those Palestinian taxi drivers personally. And I was very confused, because when we went to Bethlehem, which is on the other side of the border into Palestine, my taxi driver, we just drove through like there was no border at all. And then when we drove back, I was assuming there was going to be this huge investigation, and there wasn't at all. We literally drove through like it was nothing. And then he explained to me, like, he's been doing that for years, and they know him and everybody in his car, and they know who's in the car and what's in the car, at all times. At all times. And they know how much gas is in the car at all times. Like, it's truly impressive how much intelligence Israel applies to its national security and its borders and its immigration. And they make, by the way, no bones about profiling people based on what they look like, or what countries they've traveled to, or if they sense that there's any potential threat of any kind. They're going to stop and analyze that until they feel very comfortable about whatever that perceived threat was. They're not going to risk any potential threats. Which is why they've not really had any. And you don't do what they've managed to do. It's truly unbelievably impressive that Israel's managed to secure its borders from terrorist attacks if you just stop and think about that for more than a fucking half of a second. It's truly unbelievable. I mean, terror attacks happen everywhere all the time. Even, as Johan can tell you, even Stockholm had a few terrorist attacks. Israel has not, generally. If you stop and think about how fucking miraculous that is a testament to the skills and abilities of the people doing the due diligence, or whatever you want to call it, the security detail there in Israel. It's unbelievable, and the results kind of speak for itself. The fact that they've managed to essentially avoid, and what no doubt is one of the most difficult pieces of geography to secure. And like I was saying, the President Sharon is also one of the most targeted individuals. When he spoke at the event, that he has more potential. He's probably a higher profile target than most American politicians, honestly. And that's why they know how to do that so well, and that's why their cybersecurity is amongst the best in the world. And it is what it is. Anyway, we managed to somehow turn that into a tech story, even though it wasn't meant to be. So,
I actually have a tech story that are not in the news in that way. And this is I'm proud of my country. The thing is that we have delivered weapons to Ukraine, the Carl Gustav rocket launcher, or recoilless rocket launcher, and that weapon actually obliterated the most modern tank Russia has sent to the front. Their most pristine and their pearl of tank was destroyed by one rocket from a Swedish handheld launcher. This gives me some pride, Swedes. You went done.
Okay. A federal. I'm just looking through the tweets in advance. We're going to get to the tweets in a bit. Before we do, we're going to go through the big tech stories, as we always do. Going once, going twice. If anyone has a non-tech story they want to share.
I don't know whether I wasn't here yesterday. Did we discuss the Northern Ireland elections?
Northern Ireland elections?
Correct.
No, we didn't. What's going on?
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, Sinn Féin, kind of like won the election, and it's kind of like a major thing. So basically, they are the ones who's kind of leading it from the front to unify the island. So that's going to be like quite significant in terms of the actual what direction the Britain is going to take from this point onwards. So, they get to actually choose the first minister, and ultimately, if this continues, then not just the Scotland, but Northern Ireland would also kind of like go towards the island, and that's ultimately going to be the direction towards joining the euro. So,
oh right,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm really not at all familiar with this topic, but I did hear that this was one of the big concerns as a result of Brexit, was that Northern Ireland potentially could end up reunifying with Ireland so that it could be part of the EU, for example. So that will be interesting to see.
But the turning point is, because that's what the big force behind the whole, military or kind of like armed struggle. And for that to convert after 1990s, when the Good Friday Agreement happened, for that to follow through the democratic path, and then ultimately now won the election and majority, that's, for the very first time, the armed resistance actually kind of like turning into democratic power and then ultimately winning election. So that's that angle too, by the way.
Okay.
Dave's here. Dave might have a view on this too, but Karam, you're absolutely right. That was quite an interesting election day, Thursday into Friday. But the DUP, which is the Democratic Unionist Party, essentially the opposition in Northern Ireland, and the last leaders really, they have already said that they are not going to partake in the actual opening of the assembly in Northern Ireland until this is resolved. So they're not going to work with the Sinn Féin candidates to have an elected assembly until the UK government has sorted out this protocol issue. So they're basically counter-threatening as such, and therefore Boris Johnson's government will have to do something which they've already decided they're going to do. And it's really about abandoning the protocol and applying new principles to how this is going to work, which of course is not going to go down well with the EU at all. And so, yes, Sinn Féin and its new leadership powers in Northern Ireland will actually raise a critical issue on the island of Ireland and for the rest of the UK, break up, etc., etc. Thank you.
Okay.
Tyler.
Yes, sir. Or ma'am, rather. Sorry.
Well, it's a good one. Just along the lines of interesting elections and wins across the globe, Fernando Marcos Jr. just is in route to win the election in Philippines, which is basically Imelda Marcos.
Uh-huh.
And like, I think her grandson, I know this from a buddy of mine that went to school with went to school with them in London. And it looks like the win is happening where the Marcos will be going back into power in the Philippines.
Will she reclaim all her shoes?
Well, I know I was thinking the same thing, but I could be really cheeky of a joke there, but I'm going to let it ride because it's a male, so you never know. Maybe he's got a better taste in shoes.
Okay, so I think that takes us to the big tech headlines. That was a little appetizer. We got the tweets coming up. Let's jump into the big tech headlines as we do. Where's the air horn? There it is. Here we go. Hold on, Ted.
Well,
so the top tech story today is from Bloomberg about Do Kwon's algorithmic UST stablecoin, designed to trade at $1, but fell as low as 60 cents. CoinMarketCap says there are 18.5 billion USTs in circulation. Algorithmic stablecoins, like their more traditional counterparts, are supposed to provide calm in the chaos of crypto. But that one doesn't, and Bloomberg's doing a deep dive on it. That's great. There's a sister article that Binance has temporarily suspended withdrawals of Luna and UST tokens due to high volume of pending withdrawals and network slowness and congestion. Binance has resumed withdrawals of Luna and UST tokens after the two tokens crashed on Tuesday on the back of a broader fall in the crypto markets. The next sister article says that, according to CoinMarketCap, that UST stablecoin loses its USD peg at $1, falling to as low as 60 cents after the Luna Foundation Guard pledges 1.5 billion of its Bitcoin reserves to support UST. Last sister article is from Bloomberg that Bitcoin fell 10% to around 31,000, its lowest level since July 2021, as investors flee riskier investments like Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, and others also fell. So there's just a whole bunch of crypto fallout going on at the moment. Amay or Ben or any other crypto geeks have any comments to share?
I saw Aaron down there, and I know Nicholas as well. But at some point, I just believe that, I think it was a gentleman yesterday talking about basically in an overarching description that people really need to understand this space deeply before they start just sort of aping in and start using all their life savings and mortgaging the house and selling the wife or the husband. It gets to be a little bit, I think that there's a level of understanding, deep understanding, that's not there yet. And I think Nicholas has alluded to this on many, specifically has stated this in some conversations, as well as Ben too. And I think that's something that what you're seeing now is a lot of people getting really, really nervous about what's happening in the space, but also some of us that have been here quite some time are not as stressed and nervous because there's a lot of narratives that are going on in the mainstream media. But if you look at just how the wallets are being created, what's happening on movements. I mean, El Salvador just literally bought a whole bunch more of Bitcoin. And, Panama's already got a regulation that's about to be moved forward within the next 30 days in a positive way towards Bitcoin. So, and Tyler, that's what we said. Remember, we said that once one Latin American country goes in, we talked about this months ago, that others would follow in suit. And I was in a Panamanian Twitter space where they were discussing, because they were really celebrating the fact that they were able to push forth the bill. And inside that conversation, I tweeted at you, Tyler, as well, because inside that conversation, they did specifically say that El Salvador is obviously having a much more difficult time because of the infrastructure of El Salvador. But the way the Panamanian government is set up and the way it's organized, he said that the way they put forth the request was well received. So they are looking at 30 days from a week and a half ago that you will see the potential that Panama will be the next Latin American country to go onto that Bitcoin bandwagon. So when you start hearing positive news like this and you start seeing the contradiction in the space, you start to wonder which one is saying the truth. And I think the truth comes from actually being able to hear people on the ground and people that are in positions of governmental agencies that are actually moving and writing documents and stuff. So I think this is really something to really discern what you're reading and just parse it by doing some more critical research that in interoperable spaces.
Okay.
From my own perspective.
Go ahead, Nicholas.
Sorry.
You go. And Aaron was flashing his mic, and I just want to say welcome back, Aaron. And I saw Dave. We had again the two Irish brothers with us on stage again. And
they're back.
Yeah, we were just talking about there was an article about Northern Ireland elections, and it would be nice to hear Dave or Aaron's Irish thoughts about what might happen, like just a feasibility assessment. But hold that thought, because I want to hear what Nicholas has got to say about what the craziness that's happening in crypto land at the moment.
So, first of all, thanks. Also looking forward to hearing Aaron and Dave's views on Sinn Féin. I think it's very simple. The chickens are coming home to roost. The markets are what's known as risk off, which means that people are liquidating their positions. The crypto market is 100% correlated to the other risk markets, like the stock market, etc. But they are even more exposed because most people who've been in the assets for a long time are extremely levered. So they're borrowing money against their core position, which is usually a Bitcoin position, and then they are using the borrowed money to put that money into other faster moving coins. So there is what's known as a liquidation cascade that goes on, where if the markets fall, which they have been doing, the cascade is to get to liquidity, and so people start selling those other assets. And as such, when you've got borrowed assets, which a lot of the community are doing, you get these outsized falls. In respect of Terra and Luna, this is a poorly constructed, what they call algorithmic stablecoin, that also has centralized control mechanisms through what they call LFG, which is their sort of Fed equivalent. And they have had 3 situations where they have injected further collateral to stabilize their peg. Furthermore, they put in Bitcoin as part of their reserve, and that reserve has obviously devalued by at least 25%. So whilst other people may think that El Salvador is reasoning for failure or for success is the adoption of Bitcoin, it's not really been very effective at all. And Bukele had to buy more Bitcoin, and I don't think if I was his citizen, I would be particularly happy.
Is it just me or did we lose Nicholas?
Yeah, did we lose him on that last statement that if he were the people of
So
El Salvador, they wouldn't be
Nicholas.
he wouldn't be that happy?
It's on a phone call.
Nicholas.
Oh,
yeah, sorry, I just got I don't know why the phone interrupted.
Welcome back.
Sorry. So I was going to say I wouldn't be very happy if I was a citizen of El Salvador and my central bank bought an asset that devalued by 25% within 1 year of putting it on my balance sheet. So I think that anybody who's under any illusions that Bitcoin is an inflation hedge has learnt the lesson. People who got in at $1, of course, it's an inflation hedge for them. Everyone who bought in at anything above 30,000 is feeling that this is not a good inflation hedge, and it will impact the whole sector. It has illustrated that whilst these are useful tools for speculation, they are not providing the stability that mature markets will need. In the case of Terra and Luna, this is a badly constructed algorithmic stablecoin, and they are experiencing what in the old days would be known as a run on the bank. And they have lost the confidence of their stakeholders. They are being assisted by people like Binance, who are effectively slowing the run from the exits, effectively closing the doors by suspending trading. And that all is, a feature of, loose money, and is a result of zero interest rate policies. When there's no yield available in the market, people will speculate. When there is yield available, people will seek that yield. And so I think it's all to be expected. There will be long-term repercussions. I suspect, and I'm fearful, that the US government will take steps to curb stablecoins for this very reason, which is bad for the industry.
Can I play devil's advocate for 1 second? If Panama and a handful of other countries, I know this might seem fantastical, but just fantasize with me for a second. If they adopt Bitcoin in a similar way as El Salvador, and if they collectively do what El Salvador's done, which is buy the dips so every time it goes below 32,000, and 31.5 seems to be a support point, a technical support point. And if you have multiple countries waiting to double down every time it gets down to 32,000, and people understand that and know that, might that have a self-fulfilling prophecy type of effect where the entire world will stop selling and hold at 32,000, and because countries, you get enough potential buyers and countries saying, yeah, well, we're in it for the long haul, and we're gonna, every time it gets down to 32, we're just gonna buy more. And you have Panama and El Salvador and Nicaragua and Cuba or Mexico or whoever all kind of publicly making that position. That would I'm not aware of another scenario like that, but theoretically that could happen, I guess. Anywho, it's a fantasy.
I'm just wondering what would bring that to happen. Like, you'd need
just
a movement of some sort.
Yeah, I think I think Jorge would have an interesting comment on this, but you want to get to Dave and Aaron regarding Ireland. We don't want to leave them waiting, but I think
Nicholas has a point to make before we move on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say about your fantasy that they're very small countries with very small balance sheets, relatively speaking, and the size of Bitcoin is dwarfs them essentially. Okay. And I just think that in order to the Fed has this stabilization power because they've got such a giant capability to create capital and to stabilize markets with it. People who are in Bitcoin are not coordinated, and they don't have a coordinated approach in the same way. So you'd need a lot of very large countries to have an interest in doing that. I think that the floor on Bitcoin will be tested as the market gets worse. So, just hold on to your hats is the general viewpoint.
Okay, I'll take that.
Tyler, could I just give you one point from what they were talking about in that Twitter space, which was really important? The fact of the matter is that the Panama Canal is in Panama. I mean, like literally, the Straits, and they actually have a strong relationship with the US in terms of like arrangements and trade agreements. This was a very, very well thought out document and bill that was put forward in Panama. So I don't want to really minimalize the power of a Latin American country simply because it's not that large. I think that doesn't do a service to the Latin American community, in my opinion, and also being Latina myself. I don't necessarily think that's the best way to sort of start to align with pitting people's countries against each other and who's got the bigger swinging, you know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, we are deglobalizing, and there's a number of elements that in deglobalization are starting to already happen. So I really don't want to sit there and just assume that because a country doesn't have the power or has not had the power because they've been under the fingers of other countries and ecosystems that they can't rise up. So Tyler, I'm going to sit on the side of Jack Dorsey with this one and say that I think it's possible. I don't think it's impossible. I think with everything that's going on, it's possible. There's just so much uncertainty in the world. There's nothing that's going to stop someone from trying, for sure.
They can certainly do it, and there's no diminution of the importance of Latin American countries. This is just mathematics. The benefit of being on the dollar system and being part of the World Bank and IMF and everything else is that you get the support when you need it from those nation states that stabilize the system because they're stronger together. When you go off that system, as El Salvador found out, you will be sternly reprimanded by the powers that be. So it takes a lot of moxie, shall we say, to put the finger up to those guys, and they will,
There's a price for being under their system, though, Nicholas, and there's also a price for trying to get out of it, right?
I'm not suggesting it's not a good idea. I'm just saying that when you're a nation state and you're part of the national infrastructure, international infrastructure, there are agreements and pacts and all of these different things that you've signed up to that that have benefits and costs. What I'm suggesting is for those people to go and put one in the eye of their international agreements is something that is very difficult to do. And the question is, for what benefit? Why will they benefit from using a volatile cryptocurrency? And I'm a big advocate for these things. So I'm not against cryptocurrencies. I'm saying if I was the prime minister of those countries, it would be a very difficult decision to make myself unloved amongst the international.
Yeah, I don't know if we lost you or you were just done. But I think that the problem with politicians is that they want to be loved. It comes down to a philosophical premise. If your ethics is such that you want to do something to change the world, then you go into politics to change the world. And really, public opinion is of secondary priority to you, as opposed to if you go into politics because you want power, then you're going to do anything to make yourself loved. And this, you have to have a backbone to be a politician with principles and ethics and try to make a change. And this is the price. Now, I think, I too will be curious, very curious to hear what Aaron has to say, because I just read your profile for the first time, Aaron. And I think that, Bitcoin is going to reach all-time highs by the end of this year, because there's a lot of news that gets lost. And for instance, this whole thing with Fidelity, you know, it the thing to focus on is usage and adoption. right? So the last week of April, we got one of the most bullish announcements possible. Fidelity announced that they're going to offer Bitcoin as an option for their 401k participants, right? So now you think about that. And this is where I'm leading to where, it ties in with El Salvador, because towards the end of the year, if Bitcoin hits $100,000, people are going to love Bukele again. What he's got to do is stay the narrow path. Because back to Fidelity, they've got more than 30 million 401k and retirement accounts that they administer. It's the largest administrator for 401k accounts in the United States. Nobody else comes close. And when they made this announcement, it like barely registered in the media. So if we look at the makeup of the new employees coming into the system, which are millennials and Gen Zers, they've never had the option to allocate capital into Bitcoin into their 401ks, right? So if you're a 23-year-old just coming into the workspace, you now have the opportunity to buy Bitcoin with your retirement money. You're going to buy Bitcoin and you're going to buy it every single month that you get paid for years. You'll see hundreds of billions of dollars of 401k contributions come into Bitcoin. And at the same time, we've got this HODL rate of about 60%. So you've got this immovable object of HODLers that just won't sell no matter what. And then you've got millions of people with that same belief. They don't care what Bitcoin does day in and day out, right? So if you look at like the early boomers, right, they had the same view of Warren Buffett 40, 50 years ago. It didn't matter whether Berkshire Hathaway went up 50% or down 100%, down 80%. They didn't care. They believed in Warren Buffett. So those boomers made a fortune, but it took them 30, 40, 50 years. The same thing is going to happen with Bitcoin, but it's not going to take that long. And here's the last thing, okay? We forget about Wall Street greed, right? And it's the whole key to the incentives of Wall Street that make this news for Fidelity incredibly bullish, which is going to affect the price of Bitcoin, which is going to help Bukele by the end of the year. And the key is understanding Wall Street's greed, right? So if Fidelity rolls this out, and as it starts acquiring billions and billions of dollars of new assets that get allocated to Bitcoin, you need to look at the fees. The fees on its Bitcoin products are 4 times to 5 times higher than the fees on its standard index products. And a typical index product might have a fee of 15 to 25 basis points, and 25 basis point is a stretch. Compared to a Bitcoin product, it has fees of at least 90 to 100 basis points, not to mention the spread between the bid and the offer that Fidelity is going to be able to get from it. So this is going to be a highly profitable product for Fidelity. And as the company rolls in dollars under management in its Bitcoin product and starts generating all these fees, the money is just going to start rolling in. When you're generating fees in retirement accounts, those fees are sticky because a recent college grad at 23 years of age will start contributing and giving Fidelity all that money. He won't be able to withdraw that money until they're 59 and a half without incurring some fees. So you're talking about at least 35 years before they can touch that money. So Fidelity can collect fees like clockwork for 30 plus years over and over and over again. And how long before all of Fidelity's competitors on Wall Street duplicate that product? No way in hell they're going to miss out on this easy money. So in the not too distant future, and I mean like within 12 months, every major 401k provider in the country is going to be providing Bitcoin as an option to invest in. And if they don't offer it, employees are going to start pressuring their fund administrators at the companies where they work to switch to invest their retirement accounts into Bitcoin. There will be this push from workers against their employer's decision on which company they use, and it will push them to adopt a retirement services provider that supports Bitcoin. And you don't have to have a keen imagination to understand how those incentives are going to work, how it's going to push up the price of Bitcoin with this global adoption rate, and then you're going to see all-time high in Bitcoin, and then Bukele will be loved again.
Shall I
That
chime
was a
in?
mic drop. That was my. I love it.
First things first. Yeah, welcome back. Apologies, I've been silent for a while. Talking about home, Ireland. I left Ireland 19 years ago, guys. Listen, back to Quram, which is democratic vote. Whatever happens on the island of Ireland, as long as the people get to decide what happens and they're happy with the outcome, then let it be for me, as far as I'm concerned. I don't go either way. I live in the UK. My children are British. I'm proud to be British. I'm proud to be Irish. I'm proud to have them as British. So whatever happens for the nation of Irish people, I wish them all the best. I really, really do. Love my home. Now back to tech news. George, some great observations. Really, really good. I was going to chime in on the back of Nicholas to say that the Fidelity 401k news is probably more impactful than any of the Panama related news. It is a couple of just small nuances. So the fees will be about 75 to 90 bips. The figures under management for 401k is 2.7 trillion, all public information. I don't say anything else that's not public. So yes, it's going to be a good place for Fidelity, but more important is what you said at the end there, George. It's about this is an asset class that is for the future. It's for people to hold on to as part of their portfolio for a long period of time. So from that perspective, is it a backing and support of that asset class, that digital asset in Bitcoin? Yes, I think Fidelity made its position very clear. We, again, all public information, we first mined our first ever Bitcoin 9 years ago. I work in the team called Fidelity Center for Applied Technology. We look at future disruptive innovation and technologies many, many years before they come to the market. And for all these years, we've been heavily involved in digital assets. But the decision to back Bitcoin to begin with is a starting point. Digital assets, we believe, is the future. We've been very open, transparent about that in the market. And Abby Johnson is also at Consensus later this year in a month's time. So I think it'll be interesting to keep an eye on what's publicly announced. But needless to say that some of the points earlier on about losses and people putting their inheritance, people putting their 401ks into things, let's be very clear. People on tech news around the world have been talking about Bitcoin, digital assets, crypto, Luna, Terra, whatever, for a long while. But to everyone else out there, to the Joe Public and the Jane Does and whoever are out there with their 401ks, their savings, their money, this is still relatively new, relatively nuanced area for them. And so just because you've been hearing about it here for quite some time doesn't mean that to people on the streets, the people in their workplaces, that this is old hat, this is new news to them. And the market is still so nascent, it's still so raw that you are going to have scams, you are going to have rug pulls, you are going to have issues. It's not mature by any stretch of the imagination on some of these protocols and some of these layers. There are years and years of building ahead for a blockchain-based financial services infrastructure. But do we believe that the financial services infrastructure is changing and it is more inclusive towards digital assets? I think the announcement is clear. I hope that helps. Thanks, folks.
Hey, Aaron, this is Ken. I got a question for you.
Yeah, man.
Jorge implied that I think he may have implied it as the general product, but like he talked about the Fidelity Bitcoin product having higher fees than, let's say, maybe a bond fund or something. I was in the business too, and I know that different products have different fees. But sometimes when you offer something like a 401k, you're negotiating a deal with an employer, for what you're going to charge, participants, and sometimes it could be a flat fee, and you're not necessarily going to charge the participants a higher fee if they pick this product within the 401k versus another product. So I just wanted to understand, that issue, how that works. In let's say a Fidelity administrated 401k, do people pay more money if they choose even a growth stock fund versus a bond fund? Is there a difference in fees within a 401k, or because it's a 401k, it's basically a flat fee? It doesn't matter what product choice they make.
Sure, Ken. Apologies, I think I mispronounced Jorge's name as George. Sorry, Jorge.
No, I go by either one. It's fine.
Yeah, my boss who runs FCAT is technically a Jorge, but he calls himself George as well. So that's cool, man. So hey, listen, Ken, it's a good question, and to be very direct about it, I was not involved in any stretch of the imagination around administering fees on this product or this fund. What I do know is that it's limited. Any 401k fund is limited to 20% Bitcoin allocation. So there is a limit.
No. I understand, but
Sure.
that wasn't really my question. My question, let's make believe Fidelity never even made the Bitcoin announcement. Where I was going was if Fidelity is the 401k administrator and you're an employee, they give you a whole choice of different
Yeah,
products.
of course.
Some
Yeah.
of them will even be not Fidelity products because, as you know, how 401ks work. Even if Fidelity is the administrator and most of the funds are Fidelity, they'll still offer a couple of T Rowe Price or something else or whatever, and they'll have some like big funds or Git funds or stable, what they call stable dollar, whatever, real stable dollar. Okay, but on the stuff that Fidelity is, that's in their, there's a 401k option. What I'm saying is, I don't know if there's a different fee if someone chooses a stock fund versus a bond fund within a 401k. Outside of a 401k, yes, stock funds generally have higher fees than bond funds. But I think within a 401k, it might be part of the kind of like umbrella agreement with the employer that we're only going to charge this much money as a percent of assets, and it's more of a flat fee. So therefore, it doesn't matter what investment choice the person makes within their 401k. That was my question.
Got it, Ken. Got it. And the simple answer for me is I don't know. I wouldn't be in the place to answer. So I can certainly find out the answer and bring it back, but I don't know right now.
Okay. So the next topic is from CNBC, and it's kind of related. At Monday's close, that was yesterday, right? The largest U.S. tech companies lost $1 trillion in value over 3 trading sessions. Apple lost $220 billion. Microsoft lost $189 billion. Amazon lost $173 billion. Facebook lost $70 billion. And you add all that up and you get to about $1 trillion in value, which is a whole lot of value. Apple, the most valuable publicly traded company, has seen its market cap trimmed by over $200 billion since Wednesday. That's the story. Next.
Yeah, but isn't this really a market correction? I feel like most of these tech companies were overvalued anyways. Aren't we really just looking at a correction?
I heard, Cheryl, that they could go down 75% and still be overvalued.
Well, many of them have.
I don't know if that's true or not.
Many of them have. Many NASDAQ stocks have gone down 75%. One way to...
Netflix is down 73% already.
Precisely my point.
Year to date.
Right. So I think one way to position it or frame the narrative is that Netflix is a great example. That prior to the earnings reports where the Netflix data gets revealed as to how the future growth is growing, if the future growth is still up and to the right, it's a multiplier effect. People are willing to bet multiples because things are going in the right direction, and who knows how much farther that future is going to go, and you get a multiple of value. And then when it turns out that's no longer the case, all of those people turn the other direction, all of them, and it now means the opposite. Now it means not only is there unlimited upside still happening, it's now a very clear opposite. It's the days are now numbered. It's not just that, let's see how things grow with the market. No. You've got competitors and the market is saturated, and you've gone from, I'm trying to think of an appropriate metaphor where everything's going great and the growth is very optimistic to you have cancer now. Metaphor.
I think the word you're looking for is leverage. Nicholas,
Yes.
can you comment on the relative notional size of the stock market, bond market, and derivative markets? I've heard that if the bond market's 4 to 5 times what the stock market is, that derivatives is something crazy, but I've never been able to verify any of that. I don't have the background you do, though.
I don't think Nicholas is here. I just wanted to say one thing. Like, at times, if you look at it like the whole perspective, imagine if there was it took a week to actually gain this $1 trillion in all those 4 or 5 companies, and then nothing consolidated. Nobody actually cashed out. And then after 3 days, it came down to where it was. So effectively, if you look at the value of it, like those were just the numbers. I mean, that didn't translate into the actual wealth itself. So, I mean, at times this whole game is just a number game, the people to play a video game on it.
Yeah, but there was the COVID kind of boom, which was unrealistic. It led to very positive quarter results for a bunch of tech companies. That was a very it was an anomaly of social behavior that was unsustainable, and now the correction is underway as people return back to the a more of a normal post-COVID environment. All of that growth is now. It wasn't as if that growth was going to continue for years to come. It was very a momentary, unique event, and now we need to go back to a reality, and all of that upside enthusiasm must be accounted for.
But that reality is driven by the economists and, feds basically. So now if the calculation is going to be on that, okay, fine, there's going to be inflation there and the Fed's going to actually raise up the interest, then it has to affect the markets.
Simultaneous to the end of the COVID upswing tech quarter reports, you now have the supply chain issues as a result of China COVID lockdowns and everything, and you have quarter reports that are now not so positive, and you have Chinese supply chain issues compounding on top of that, including Tesla, all kinds of companies, and you're going to have some really
don't forget the war and crude oil.
Yeah, right, and the inflationary pressures and all this. We're just having a multiplier effect of negative layers of clouds on top of each other, which are painting a very dark quarter, and so you're going to have a whole lot of selling. And now it's not a coincidence that we're just coming out of the quarter reports for all these companies, and they were all quite dark and pessimistic and negative. And that's turning the market rather substantially south. And you could call that a correction, I guess, or a recalibration, I think would be more appropriate. But it is what it is. I mean, my email address and my Twitter handle are steep decline for a very notable reason, and have been for a very long time. To me, these types of events are far more easy to anticipate than the opposite. I have a hard time anticipating upward growth. To me, these downward corrections are far more easy to anticipate when you watch these compounding effects of wars and inflation and supply chain issues and
uncertainty, right? Like it's mainly the uncertainty of the future.
Correct. And you can add in, by the way, the anxiety of a lot of folks. There's the sentiment report and the confidence. What do they call that? That sentiment analysis of the consumer confidence or whatever. So anyway, the
Michigan Sentiment Index.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of. The Tiger Global has lost. Tiger Global has lost about $17 billion in 2022 during the tech sell-off, erasing about 2/3 of its gains made since 2001 in the past 4 months. Ouch! Holy shit! Hedge fund suffers breathtaking drop as speculative stocks sink from pandemic peaks. Is the headline from Financial Times. Next is from CNBC. Coinbase, Robinhood, Rivian, UiPath, Marqeta, and Toast are down 65% from their IPOs. Over half of 53 tech companies that went public in 2021 are down more than 50%.
I need someone on Wall Street to just take a look out the window, make sure it's safe. I don't know. I'm feeling 1989-ish here.
Yeah, there's definite shades of 1990 bubble crash for sure. For rather different reasons, though. And there's shades of 2008 as well. And there's, again, it's its own unique version. And these are not unprecedented events. And these things come along every 15 years or so. And so it's not to be unexpected.
Hey, Tyler, can I distinguish some of those crashes for that question? I think the reference to
they all have their uniquenesses.
They're unique, okay. But I think the reference to 1990 was probably like 80. Was it 86 or 87? That was it crashed 26% in one day or something. That
Yes.
wasn't 1990. Yeah, okay. So that was 26% in one day, and the Fed basically bailed out the market. The Fed's typically, this bailed out the market a bunch of times, but their ability to bail out the market now is it's just not there because they're trying to shrink their balance sheet. So what happened in 87, where they literally did an infusion to bail out the stock market, which is quite frankly the first mistake, and it's led to the asset bubble subsequently. They're not in the position to do anymore. I personally think this is closer to all of them to the internet bubble meltdown because a lot of it is tied to where valuations were and rising interest rates. People, you need to remember, Greenspan raised rates right before the internet bubble, pricked. The housing bubble was which was 2008, was its own thing. Okay, because we never had a housing crash like that again, before. So and then and the way that housing got financed at that up until that point was unique and everything. So 2008 had some really unique qualities to it, but I think this is much more common. What happened during the internet, when the internet stocks crashed, and the only difference is, despite it was an internet bubble, I think tech is a much more important component of equity market capitalizations, or high growth companies or perceived high growth companies are a much bigger percentage of the market capitalization than they even were then. So that's that would be the other difference with where we were when the internet bubble broke in 2000. And I'm done speaking.
Well, I appreciate that, Ken. Thank you.
Okay, so next up is a study claims the implementation of EU's GDPR, that's the consumer data protection, has reduced the number of apps on Google Play by a third, increased costs, and reduced revenues for app developers. Yeah, but it gained users their privacy. That was kind of the point. And by the way, the policymakers aren't going to shed any tears over that. Privacy rules increase cost, reduce choice, slash revenues, a study concludes. Europe's data protection regime, the politicians are not going to be upset about that. It's going to be my short take on that. And they foresaw that, and they know that's the cost of it, but it is what it is. Yeah, some business models get crushed to the benefit of users generally. There will be no alligator tears shed. So the next is from Reuters that the UK and the EU say that Russia launched a cyber attack on satellite internet network Viasat at the onset of the Ukraine war in late February, affecting many in Ukraine. Russia was behind a massive cyber attack against the satellite internet network, which took thousands of modems offline. I thought we already knew that. Anyway.
We did, but what's important is I was expecting Russia to do like a multi-pronged attack, both physical and cyber. It seemed like they've shifted to all physical now, but at the start, yeah, we identified several cyber attacks that were sort of launched and organized by Russia, and they were targeting multiple countries at the time, not just Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Next, researchers detail a malicious campaign that used Windows event logs to store malware a technique that has not been previously documented publicly in attacks. Security researchers have noticed a malicious campaign that used Windows event logs to store malware. As ingenious creativity of hackers knows no bounds, and no stones will be left unturned. The next is from Engadget. Sony does their Q4 report. Who cares?
Tyler, before you say who cares, okay, because it relates to Sony. And I had tweeted something out the other day, and it was like one of them you didn't get to yesterday. And Cheryl says, make sure you mention it, tomorrow. Okay. And this has been tweeted to Tech News before. So the FTC has announced they're doing an investigation into Sony's proposed acquisition of, I think it's Bungie, the video game company that they're going to buy, which makes like Halo and everything. And the reason why that's significant is also because that's really a smaller situation, or maybe less controversial, let's say, than the Microsoft Activision one. So if they're going to investigate that, how are they not going to take a look at Microsoft Activision? Now, there is a real question, again, given what our antitrust laws are, whether this is, whether there's any kind of real antitrust issue here. I guess maybe because Sony makes, maybe because, again, that would maybe like a vertical merger. Microsoft Activision may be considered a vertical merger because they both make the machines that people play the games on. Those are hard. Vertical mergers are harder to the government to object to than horizontal mergers. It's not like Activision merging with Bungie. That would be that would be a horizontal merger. And I just wanted to just mention that because that was a news story. I think it was in the information that the FTC is, and they're not objecting to the Sony acquisition. They're just like they're asking, they're investigating it. So anyway, just throw it out there, and I'm done speaking.
Okay. The next is that a tech blog called The Information says they have sources that Meta is considering reducing the money it gives the mainstream media news outlets and focusing on news content as short videos on Facebook rather than as links to articles. So Meta
This is going to create a whole new war.
Indeed. And we've talked about the irony of the fact that Facebook gives a bunch of money to the mainstream media, and yet they receive a whole lot of kind of hit pieces in return. And so it was this doesn't surprise me in the least. It's like, why? Ostensibly the reason Facebook was giving a bunch of money to mainstream media was to limit a number of hit pieces they would likely receive. But if the hit pieces are going to happen anyways, then why are you sending those people money? So Meta's considering reducing the money that they give to mainstream media and focusing on news content as short-form videos, which they should do. Facebook they totally should do this before YouTube and TikTok are on the brink of taking that over. People are starting to get their news from TikTok and YouTube, and they should be getting it from Facebook because a lot of people get their news from Facebook, but it's in the form of text articles, and they need to start converting that into video with a quickness, as that's how people are shifting their consumer behavior as phone screens are getting bigger and brighter and connectivity is getting faster. We're switching from a text-based web to a video-based web. That's what's happening. And Facebook.
But this is another nail in the coffin for newspapers. I just can't see them taking this lying down.
Right, but I mean, media in general. And by the way, Los Angeles. This goes back to conversations I had in LA, Santa Monica, back in 2007, 8, 9, when LA was trying to differentiate itself from Silicon Valley. We're trying to grow a startup ecosystem, and we met very regularly. We formed a tight knit group who had a shared passion to try and raise the flag for Silicon Beach to get some respect for what's the entrepreneurship happening around Santa Monica. And one of the points that we pondered was, hey, connectivity is going to get faster. We are going to shift from a text-based web into a more multimedia web, mainly video. And that's why we should we should differentiate around the point of content. LA does content. San Francisco does not do content. They don't want to do content. They don't want to have anything to do with content. LA is all about content. And so if you are a tech entrepreneur and your innovations have anything to do with content, you should probably build your company in Los Angeles rather than San Francisco. And San Francisco didn't, argue that point. They kind of agreed with that. So, because we knew long term, as the web became more and more about content and video content and everything else, LA would rise in the ranks accordingly, and it has. That has happened. YouTube has massive studios in Marina Del Rey or Mar Vista, north of the airport, south of Santa Monica or Venice Beach. Google set up in Venice Beach, and Snapchat's in Venice Beach, and the party started getting going, and it's all around content. And it's Facebook needs to make that change. The whole web's got to make that change. That's in some ways bodes well for tech and doesn't bode as well for traditional mainstream media. And because the long-term implication when you play this shit out is everyone's got a HD and soon to be 4K and soon to be 8K camera in their goddamn pocket with a 4K soon to be 8K screen in their pocket. And these platforms, if they're done correctly, will enable whoever's got the most valuable video to be sharing it with everybody else. And to a degree, that's why we're able to consume. That's why Ukraine is such an interesting story, because this is like one of the first major global, aware conflicts where drone footage is able to be seen simultaneously around the world, within 24 hours. And misinformation and disinformation campaigns are being exposed for what, that's why this is so interesting, because the people on the ground are able to add an element of, call it journalism, better than the journalists can. You're not consuming what's happening on the ground in Ukraine from the regular CNN, BBC sources. You're getting it from the office of the Prime Minister of Ukraine directly through his own videos and his own Twitter account and their own,
and without the clickbait.
Right, and it's a really interesting. Imagine World War II, if and you had governments, offices, directly creating the content, and it gets very interesting from a history of media perspective. But play that out further, and these platforms should be able to, ideally, the algorithms will get optimized to the point where anybody could become the source of the next important video at any moment. Think Rodney King beatings, think George Floyd strangling, think on and on and on a daily, ongoing basis. That doesn't bode well for mainstream media at all. And it bodes very, very well for these platforms. So circle back to the main point here, that Facebook is now going to reduce the money they give to the mainstream media, which they really probably should. Doesn't seem to be doing them any favors, and focus on short form videos on Facebook rather than links to articles, right? Because the people making those links to articles is mainstream media. People making the videos is not. And they should be focusing on that, because that's what the consumer wants to consume, is more video and less text.
And Tyler, can I make another point to that? I actually just left this room for a second because I wanted to go back and check another audio so I remember exactly who said it, because I knew it was a major conference call. But Charlie Ergen, who is runs the EchoStar, right? Big satellite company that distributes a lot of traditional programming. Okay. I guess he got asked a question, and about something that was related, and he was talking about even on video content, never mind text, that even the current video content that the studios are producing, that he distributes, that DirecTV distributes, that the cable companies distribute, needs to change because there's so much more demand now for short form video. And then he acknowledged that the younger people are, if you're watching, he said 2 hours of TikTok a day, that's 2 hours you're not watching traditional, whatever you want to call traditional TV, whether it's linear television or through a cable or satellite distributor. So that's how impactful short form video is. And I know it's been forgotten, and they just, their timing was less than impeccable because of the pandemic, but they were certainly on this. They saw this coming. People might remember that Jeffrey Katzenberg, who used to run Disney Animation and DreamWorks, and Meg Whitman, who ran eBay, and Hewlett Packard, had started a small company, I think called Quigley, that was going to just make short form videos for mobile devices. And so obviously they were a startup. And like when the pandemic hit and funding dries up and whatever, they couldn't get it off the ground. I mean, it was, because the world was collapsing around them. But, so they pulled it. But that was their theory in Quigley, that the world is going to move to short form video. And they were definitely right about that. And so it's much more important than even just replacing text.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. So the next is from Washington Post. According to researchers, Elon Musk, who vowed to defeat Twitter's spam bots or die trying, quote unquote, has long benefited from fan bots, boosting Tesla's shares and deriding critics. And Jesus Christ, it's the Washington Post versus Elon yet again. Mainstream media loves to try and poke at this. They really won't let this Elon Twitter issue die. And they're really stretching for any kind of story. They must have some kind of weird mandates at mainstream media land at the moment to dig up any stories about Elon and Twitter, that especially ones that paint either end or both of them in a negative light. And they really strain credulity to achieve headlines like this. It's bizarre. It's bizarre behavior from the Washington Post. It gets clicks, I guess. Here we are. This is, if you want to know what thirsty looks like, there it is. And this is part of the problem. That's just a nothing burger of a story. I only read it to expose the kind of thirstiness of what should be a very important pillar of society. It's bizarre. Anyway, it's really regrettable that something so important like journalism is so dependent on ad dollars and clicks, and we need to get them off of the clickbait thirsty trap that they're stuck in, because what they do is so valuable, and hopefully we'll find a suitable solution or replacement. Anyway, next is from Bloomberg, that Match Group, which is the owner of all the dating apps like Tinder and whatnot, sues Google, alleging that Google abuses its power with a requirement that developers use Google's billing system for Android apps in the Play Store. Here we go again. This whole song and dance. Yeah, they do. And we know they do. And so does Korea. And so do a bunch of countries who've already, and the Netherlands, and who've already had court cases and decided that Google and Apple both are abusing their power by requiring developers use their billing systems. It's a bunch of bullshit. It's not the open web. And yeah, you built these app stores. And yeah, apps like to benefit from being in those app stores. But let app developers bill their users directly, or stop throttling the browser and these app developers just want to charge their users. They don't want to pay you this 30% cut, and you're forcing yourself into that transaction. And you're only able to do this because there's the two of you. And if there was 5 other alternatives, this whole fucking ruse would have ended a long time ago. Anywho, it is what it is. But make no mistake, the EU is going to crack down on this really hard. And then the U.S. is going to realize, all the countries are going to start cracking down on this. It's already started. They already know it. The days are numbered. The gig is up. So they're going to, just in time, switch everybody over to the metaverse and rinse and repeat with this old.
Yeah, Tyler, didn't Google just do a deal with Spotify to allow Spotify to bill directly, I believe, if I recall?
They did something in EU, because they know that the EU, namely Margaret Vestager, who's really the point person on this, who's from Denmark, Spotify's from Sweden. We're down the road from each other. Spotify has been singing this song longer than anybody, and in the EU, and the EU is listening. And the EU is going to make it, like Korea's done, like others have done. They're going to rule in favor of EU entrepreneurs and developers and platforms, and that they're going to tell Google and Apple, hey, you have to let these developers be able to choose how they want to charge their users so they don't have to pay your 30% cut. And Google and Apple are smart enough to realize it looks better, and in the end will save them a lot of legal fees if they're going to stretch it out as long as they can and eventually capitulate, and it might as well capitulate magnanimously as if you thought it was your idea. Mark my words, that's the easiest prediction I've made this week, is a headline in the not so distant future of, these big platforms, Google and Apple, saying, hey, we just finally decided app developers should be able to charge whoever they want, and we're so nice. And we just thought on our own accord that we should do this. And yeah, fucking right. There's countries all over the planet that are already, beating your head into ground about it, and you're refusing to capitulate and willing to pay court fines for refusing to capitulate. And so we know you don't want to do this, but you're being forced to do it. And then you're going to, in the West, you're going to try and appear magnanimous by implying that you had this idea all along. And it's frankly disgusting, because you're greedy bastards. So the next one is that Tencent, who owns Riot Games, one of the biggest gaming companies, studios, Riot Games sues ByteDance in China. And that itself is quite interesting, because ByteDance is also from China. So Tencent, which is in China, owns Riot Games, who sues ByteDance, which is also Chinese, which is... they sue ByteDance's a subsidiary company called Moonton, which is Chinese, alleging the Chinese studio is ripping off Riot Games' Wild Rift, the mobile version of League of Legends. Yeah, well, that's kind of how it works over there. The intellectual property line is rather a thin veil over there. So after shutting down a Chinese developer's copy, another sprouts in North American app stores. Riot Games, makers of League of Legends, is trying to shut down a Chinese clone, basically. Next from Bloomberg, Nintendo reports Q4, who cares? New York Times says they have sources that in a note to employees, Netflix executives say an ad-supported tier could launch in Q4. Here we go. It's now, we've come full circle. We've now got ad-based content pipes. Not so different from, we're going, what's old is new again. We're going back to ad-based. And the question is, will there still be a subscription charge, or will it be a hybrid, or, what the hell will it be? We'll find out in Q4.
Well, Tyler, I think absolutely there's going to be that's what you could call it a Spotify model or a freemium model, because all the other streamers are doing that. So, Paramount, Peacock, that's what Disney Plus is going to do. That's what Netflix has said they're going to do. HBO. I mean, all the streamers are going to go to a system. You get, one price for with ads, which is lower, one price without ads, which is higher. And by the way, the amount of ads, like Amazon has a new service that they just rebranded or something from another service, which is part of Amazon Prime, but it's not Amazon Prime. So, for example, those of us in Los Angeles who might be watching, who remember the program Bosch, the sequel to Bosch is on now, Bosch Legacy, but they don't have it on Amazon Prime. They have it on the new service. It has some ads in it, but they're limited. Interestingly enough, the one of the key sponsors of that program was Fidelity, at least in the first episode. So, so the ads may get more limited on some of these services than you're used to seeing in traditional television. So, but then, yeah, but there will be two prices.
Okay. From the Wall Street Journal is reporting about a startup called Abnormal Security, which uses machine learning to identify fraudulent emails, which is sort of the tip of the spear of where a lot of the security issues stem from. And they've raised $210 million at a $4 billion valuation. So that's a valuable skill to have. The algorithms that can detect fraudulent emails that are trying to suck away your, trick your idiot employees into clicking links they shouldn't be clicking and giving away their passwords and stuff. And now they've figured out a way to prevent those emails from ever being seen by your stupid employees. That's kind of brilliant. $4 billion valuation. Next is from the Wall Street Journal that Congress could require vetting of U.S. tech startups seeking federal funding after the Department of Defense found China is exploiting a program that funds small business innovation. Oh, Jesus. China is exploiting a program that funds small business innovations, and so now Congress is going to require vetting of U.S. tech startups that are seeking federal funding. There you go. Next is that Amazon is testing paying rural mom-and-pop shops a per-package fee to deliver orders within a 10-mile radius to neighbors in places like Nebraska and Mississippi and Alabama. And this is kind of what's happening in Thailand, by the way. And by the way, Coca-Cola does similar things like this in far-to-reach areas where they pay mom and pops, regular your aunts and uncles, kids with bicycles, whoever it happens to be. They come up with last mile delivery schemes, and this one's kind of interesting that Amazon might start partnering with mom and pop stores to do last mile deliveries of packages in rural areas. Next is Ariani, which provides NFTs tied to the provenance and ownership of luxury goods, raises $20 million, led by Tiger Global. And there's a Google I/O event coming up tomorrow. So what to expect at the Google I/O event? That's once a year. Pixel Watch unveiling, a mid-range Pixel 6a, more details about Android 13, possible Pixel Buds Pro, and more. So I got to check the calendar. So we got to watch that live stream for the Google I/O event. Usually the highlight of that is they give some updates on their machine learning and AI efforts that are usually quite impressive. So we'll look forward to that, more so than their hardware. The next is Clearview Ai, being reported by the Washington Post, reaches a settlement with the ACLU by agreeing to stop selling or offering free access to its facial recognition database to most U.S. businesses. Yeah, well, they weren't even doing that anyway, so that was probably a pretty easy concession to make. Clearview reaches a settlement with the ACLU by agreeing to stop selling or offering free access to It's facial recognition database to most U.S. businesses. Yeah, that wasn't their focus anyways. They're probably laughing as they make that agreement. And Mark Zuckerberg says Meta will start letting some U.S. creators test digital collectibles and NFTs on Instagram this week. We already read that from Instagram CEO yesterday. And they won't charge for sharing of NFTs. There you go. Those are your big boring headlines for today. So now we get to go into the tweets with the 26 minutes we have left. In no particular order, the first one I have today is from David Grace from The Economist. And I'm retweeting this one like we do with all of the tweets to the Tech News Twitter account, which is TNATW, which you might have noticed, if you have a high IQ, are the first letters of tech news around the world, TNATW. So the headline from The Economist via David Grace says that wearable technology promises to revolutionize healthcare. Yes, we've said that no less than 500 times nearly every day here at Tech News Around the World, that wearable tech does promise to revolutionize healthcare in huge, crazy ways, probably even far beyond what The Economist has figured out. That wearables will be able to detect, the sensors in these wearables can detect your blood sugar, your blood pressure, your, oh Jesus, don't get me started with the things that it can detect. And in aggregate, in combination with eye trackers on and all kinds of things, the amount of data and the improvements to the ad networks is going to be truly remarkable, such that ad-based businesses, like the fact that Netflix is shifting from a subscription business, which has no ad network, it's just you pay money, you get content, to an ad-based business, that becomes more and more plausible and profitable the better they're able to target the ads at you. If the ads are not relevant, you don't click the ads, they make no money. If the ads are highly relevant, you click the ads, you buy the products, they make a lot of money from you clicking on those ads if they're highly targeted. So they have a very high incentive to send you very targeted ads. Well, how do you make targeted ads that people actually click? Relevant ads? Well, you need really good data from your users. And boy, oh boy, if you start to aggregate the blood data and genetic data and facial scanning data and voice data and mouse movement data and everything that's coming down the pipeline as we speak, you should be able, these ad networks are going to get better is a real understatement. They're going to get, you think they're scary now, you think they're listening to your conversations now, wait till you see what they're able to do when they apply massive AIs to all of these new sensors that are going to be around you in your, and everywhere you go. So yeah, wearable tech promises to revolutionize healthcare. Yes, that too, because healthcare, similar to the ad networks, is becoming more and more data-based. Apple and Amazon are racing to put more sensors and microphones and cameras all around you at all times. And healthcare is going to be transformed. A great example is period trackers and Aura rings and your sleep cycles and your diet and everything else. I'm advising a new startup out of Stockholm, which is trying to solve the issue of knowing everything that you eat. Everything that goes in your mouth, and precisely how much of it goes in your mouth, and its sugar, carb, and fat breakdown, so that they know precisely how many grams of sugar and carbs, or fats, or protein you consume, rather automagically. And oh boy, does that be, you can't imagine the value if you're able to solve that problem. That's a $10 billion company easily. That's a decacorn waiting to happen.
That's a game changer.
It's a total game
Yeah,
changer.
I'm just like, shut up and take my money here already.
Right. Well, because that's the other thing is consumers indeed would pay for themselves to have access to that data, but so would every company that you engage with on the internet. So that's just a glimpse of what's coming over the horizon. So thank you for that one, Dr. Grace. But it's just mainstream media like The Economist. They're not geeks over there. They're a year behind the conversations we have over here. We've been saying that for a very long time. We've done multiple deep dives on that issue, and we don't need to do that right now. So the next one that I have is from Jeff G, that from the Independent UK, that a rare case of monkeypox has been confirmed in a UK patient. A person in England has been diagnosed with a rare viral infection of monkeypox. Let's hope it doesn't spread. And let's hope it doesn't become airborne. Yeah, the big fear is that smallpox in some way magically returns, or something similar to it, a variation of smallpox, because a lot of people are no longer vaccinated for smallpox. And if it were to take on be spread in a way like COVID was, if it was perhaps meddled with in a lab, that's has a 30 to 40% case fatality rate. So imagine if COVID killed, half of the people that came in contact with it. You can just imagine how fast the world would be flipping it shit if that were to happen. And so the word horsepox, monkeypox, smallpox should give everybody pause when you and concern and this is potentially on the horizon, by the way, with the ever decreasing cost of access to doing genetic engineering. That all it takes is one person who feels that the solution to climate change is to kill half the people on the planet. And by the way, that's probably, I'm curious if we were able to get an accurate poll, what percentage of people on the planet believe that the solution to climate change is to eradicate a good percentage of the population? Well, I imagine that number would be somewhere in the 5% range. So
I'd say 30%.
I was going to say 15.
Well, I'm trying to be really conservative. I wouldn't shock me if it was 10 or 15. But let's based on the few shout outs we just had, let's say it's 10. So if 10% of people believe the solution to climate change to save the planet is to introduce a virus that would have a 30-40% mortality rate, that means 10% eventually 10% of genetic engineers, which the boundaries and barriers to becoming a genetic engineer are dropping by the hour, and you only need a handful of those folks to have that capabilities. It doesn't necessarily need to be a theocratically driven terrorist, like some ISIS-like figure or anything like that. I believe the chain of events, that if I have to connect these dots, the way that they connect is somebody who believes they're doing it for very important world-saving reasons will introduce a genetically variation of smallpox with a 40% mortality rate to save the planet from climate change and hold on to the horses, because once that's let loose on the wild, we don't really have a firm solution on the ready just yet. Someone's trying to jump on the mic.
Yeah, Tyler, I was about to just tell you, monkeypox, if it has a much lower fatality rate than smallpox, so it's probably not going to be that one. But your point's still well taken. That's a something like that's a possibility, right? Somewhere.
Yeah, but genetic services allow you to order components, so you don't have to make everything from scratch. Thankfully, some of these services companies coordinate together, although historically a Canadian team was able to get, I think it was horsepox, and show that they were able to, they were undetected by these safety mechanisms. So hopefully those mechanisms are a little bit more robust going forward.
It was David Evans at University of Alberta, and he did do it with horsepox, which is from a difficulty level comparable to reconstructing smallpox in a lab. And he did it
Like I
with.
know when we order components for our experiments, there are certain forms and other things that you have to fill out. You have to have special permission. There's usually an interview process. It's all
Yeah,
very
that's
secure here in Canada, at least.
but he precisely went through that experiment just to show that it could be done without people detecting him doing it.
No, but like for example, when we had 9/11, Dick Cheney was concerned that somebody, even though we think the only batches of smallpox are supposedly tightly secured in the U.S. and in Russia, that he was concerned that maybe some other state actor may get access to it. So Dick Cheney actually wanted to inoculate or re-inoculate the entire U.S. population for smallpox, and obviously that didn't happen because you know because you can actually end up with more cases, and other problems doing that without any evidence that smallpox is actually out there. But Dick Cheney actually, was vice president. He actually proposed, basically doing smallpox vaccines again because he was concerned that maybe some terrorist organization would be able to do that if they got access to it.
Yeah, that's a real concern, actually, because the cost of pulling off something like that has gone from you require $1 million lab to you could do this for maybe $50,000 or $100,000 if you know your way around things. So
No,
it's come down quite a lot, and it'll just keep falling.
that was the other reason David Evans did it at University of Alberta, was to quantify very specifically the amount of time and money resources to do it. And he claims he did it for $100,000 with 2 assistants, and it took him 6 months. This was about 5 years ago, and experts estimate that he could do it for a real fraction of that, both in terms of time and money. And that's because the cost of these things and that's how technology works. Is the costs continue to nosedive rather notably, just like computers. So watch out. The next is a tweet from Karam that a record-setting heat blasts Pakistan a glacier, lake floods a village. According to the Washington Post, rapid snowmelt caused the lake near the Shirapar Glacier to flood and wipe out an important bridge in Pakistan because it got so hot so fast it melted a glacier and took out a bridge. The next is the same issue at large from The Guardian. It says, the headline, I'm just reading the headline here, quote, "It's a hellfire!" exclamation point. How are India and Pakistan coping with extreme heat? India and Pakistan have experienced their hottest April in 122 years. Temperatures are nearing 50 Celsius. There you go. It's a hellfire is the headline from The Guardian. 50 degrees Celsius. And the next is from Bibi, from The Verge, that the U.S. State Department announces a $10 million bounty to find who hacked Costa Rica's government. We read the Costa Rican government hack a couple of days ago, and now the U.S. State Department has issued a $10 million bounty to figure out who did it. And Macron.
Tyler.
Yes, Messi.
Oh, sorry. Were you done with that one?
Oh, no, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I thought you moved. I couldn't flip off the mute fast enough earlier, but I just wanted to say it. I spent 5 days in Delhi. I flew to the UK, I think on May 2nd, so it was the 5 days prior to that, and it was between 112 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit each of the 5 days. Like there was no sort of like respite, like it hit 115 and then it would, you'd get a break for a day. But the hospitals that I work in there are all public hospitals, so they serve poor patients in and around New Delhi and actually in surrounding areas. They travel in to this is the largest public hospital in New Delhi, but there are literally only about maybe 5% of the areas of the hospital that have any air conditioning. So if you can imagine what that's like in the inpatient units, and I was primarily in the NICU and the pediatric ward, but it's painful, and the families are literally, sleeping out. If anybody's traveled, internationally into some of these lower resource settings, this isn't going to be new news for you, but just for the rest of the world, I'm trying to like paint a picture for what it's like for these families that are sleeping for 1 or 2 weeks on the pavement outside the door to the hospital, and that's where they prepare their food, that's where they eat their food, that's where they lay a towel down and sleep. And I couldn't help think how many lives must be being lost every single day in this kind of scorching environment, and the fact that it's not getting any better, and it's certainly India wide. This isn't a specific thing to New Delhi. It really was horrific, and it's about my 10th visit to Delhi, and I don't think I've ever experienced anything quite like what it was last week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't. It's coming. I mean, I think this is really easy connecting behavior. Is it's only a matter of time before Scandinavia gets scorched with what British Columbia felt last summer. Got up to similar temperatures of around 40, 45, and it's becoming very commonplace in southern Portugal and Spain as well. It's heaven forbid the Middle East. Wait, give it a couple months and let's see the record temperatures that hit Dubai. It's going to get intense, and
and the water supplies. I mean, Tyler, you've been talking about this as long as I've known you,
yes.
Right? I mean, I saw a report just on the U.S. Aquifers and the the water table in the West in early May compared to previous years, and I mean, I don't think anybody even knows what to, and it's obviously not making major news headlines the way it should be.
Correct.
But I'm terrified, like
right.
What's going to happen.
You should be, because we as humans can handle heat. People will die, handfuls of people will die, but we have solutions to high heat levels, which is like air conditioners generally. And that's why no one's going to panic over these high temperatures of 50 degrees are not going to result in anything other than headlines. There's no action and there's no real consequence to the human directly of the 50-degree Celsius temperatures. However, the water supply is very tremendously affected. And then by extension, the water supply is the boiling frog, which is your water supply is slipping away, evaporating while you're distracted. And next thing you know, you've run out of water. And now you've a sticky situation that humans just are not good at dealing with as domesticated cats that we've become. When your water bowl is dry for too many days in a row, now you start going behavior because you didn't anticipate what to do. And you didn't decide to jump out of the house window and go get your own water supply because you have been trained from birth that mommy and daddy are going to bring you the water. And that people have now for many generations been hypnotized into this false reality that governments are somehow responsible for bringing you your water and your food. They are not. That is your own. You must take self actualized responsibility for your own survival. And COVID should have taught you that lesson plain as day. So, but nonetheless, people are going to assume that Big Brother is going to refill the water bowl any moment now. And the sad reality is it won't. And that's what's going to cause people to freak out, because when it gets to that moment, it will be too late. You'll have mass panics. And by the way, this is also the foreshadow happened during COVID as well, which is as soon as an item becomes non-ubiquitous, like toilet paper, as soon as there's a shortage of an item like eggs or rice or water, that's when people start hoarding. And when everyone hoards at the same time, that's when shit really hits the fan. And that's how humans behave. And that's how it's gonna happen. Mark my fucking words. Here's how humans behave, like rats in a cage. When the water is there in your tap, you are hypnotized to sleep. The second your tap goes dry for one day, you hoard water. And not just you, your whole fucking megacity does it at the same time. And that doesn't work. And now you're fucked. And now you have now your survival is at stake and jeopardized because you didn't act when you had the opportunity, which is when the taps were still running. So watch out. What this is all will sneak up on you sooner than you can imagine. Go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to. So, firstly, this does happen with fuel shortages in the UK that weren't real fuel shortages. It was just people panicking. We know about panic buying, basically, is what you're talking about. So, on the topic of solutions, one, I think I've been trying to listen to this and trying to think across the cross section of people who are here. What can they do to ensure a water supply? And I think wherever you are, even in an apartment in a city, I think buy a dehumidifier. Buy a 20 litre a day dehumidifier. Simple as that. For 300 or 400 watts of power, less possibly, it will dehumidify water, clean water, out of the air. And if you've got it now, you'll be cool. If you haven't got it now and people catch on to it, it won't be cool because you won't be able to buy one. So that would be a solution, probably the most practical solution.
It is.
Just a thought.
That's a good suggestion, Ben. I think the other thing too is if you go to the Army supply stores, they have these big bags like liners that you can put in your bathtub, fill up with water, and it's got like a little spigot as well. And then the other thing is those 5-gallon bottles that you can find at Home Depot or Walmart. I've got like 30 of them in my basement. But those bottles you have to put on strips of wood. You can't put it on the concrete floor because there will be a chemical reaction between the plastic and concrete. But all of those things are things that should happen now when everything's plentiful.
I wanted to add something. I think Tyler, you'd like this story here in Tanzania. I went on a hike on Sunday, which was hosted by a British couple that retired on Mount Meru, which is next to Mount Kilimanjaro here in Tanzania. And they hosted us after the hike at their house. It was a very lovely house. And they're on a mountain, basically about 2,000 meters up, or about 6,000 feet. And they don't have any utility water, but they do. The villages around Mount Meru and Kilimanjaro depend on the flow of mountain water, right, coming down from the mountain, which forms rivers, etc. And they told me that they have a 60,000 liter underground rainwater capture tank, which I was like shocked because I thought, I have I think about 20,000, but they have, which is not underground but like a normal tank. But they had 60,000, and the villages in October, there was a bit of a drought in October in Tanzania. And the villagers came knocking on their door saying, "Hey, you're taking all our water, because you're higher up on us on the mountain. You're taking all the water." And they're like, "No. We have our own rainwater capture tank. That basically $6,000." And they had to show them this. There wasn't a connection from this kind of pipe that was serving the villages below before they let them, kind of let them off. But can you imagine? This is probably going to happen in the future. So in places where people depend on sort of river water flowing down from mountain, and if you're lower down and you start suspecting people higher above are taking all the water, it could cause some serious conflict. But yeah, they scared me and they convinced me that I should do the same and get a rainwater capture system as well, right? That's another solution. Obviously, not everyone can do that, but if you have a lot of land, it's probably very feasible to do.
Yeah, so this
is mentioned, by the way, that 60,000 liters lasted, the whole of October. There was zero rain and everything dried up. They didn't run out. and they've never run out in 8 years.
So this is why the sequence is energy, then water, then food, because practically any reasonable solution you come up with for water, whether it's a dehumidifier, whether it's collecting water and then pumping it somehow, unless you want to manually pump it out of that storage tank, but you probably want to UV treat it as well. Whatever it is, tends to rely on energy. So most things fall back to energy. Unless we're going to go back to the dark ages and do everything by hand, we really want plentiful energy. And it doesn't have to be any order to it. I mean, in my case, I'm doing water first because just because it goes deeper underground and the electrical cables I need to do go above. So there's kind of an order to it, like the building order. But the priority order has got to be energy first, I think, and then water, then food. The survival order is, of course, shelter, then water, then food.
Yeah, so Ben, they have solar, and I have solar. So my system is new because I built my house over the pandemic. So I have a more modern, more efficient solar system. So my solar is quote unquote better than theirs. They have solar, but it's not quite powerful enough. But what I realized on Sunday was that the fact that I live in rural Tanzania and I come across these, they're kind of neighbors. They're like 10 kilometers away from me, whatever. We learn from each other, so we can teach each other. So they're going to teach me how to do water collection better and do this tank, and I might help them with upgrading their solar when they need to. So I think that's actually one advantage of being rural, and you have other people around you. But if you're all in the city and you just don't think about it, that could be obviously harder for, maybe these rooms help, but it's nothing quite like when you stumble across someone's house and you're like, what, you really never have to rely on any other water, you have it already collected. It's quite something.
Yeah, and you need to think about the difference between a buffer and a long-term solution. So there's a big difference between a solution for 3 days, water, fill your bathtub up, that's 3 days. 3 weeks starts to get harder, 3 months, 3 years. And by the time you get out to 3 years, you're talking about a long-term permanent solution. If you're going to keep expanding your mind that way, I think it's worth preferring a long-term solution over a short-term. So if you're going to collect water in buckets and hope that when the panic starts, your tap is still flowing, when everybody else has got their taps open, it may not, versus buying a dehumidifier now, which you might find useful if you have damp problems, and plugging that in when you don't have water and getting 20 litres a day of clean water, then you're cool. Of course, that shifts the problem back to then hoping that the grid can take, is still there for you. But then that shifts the problem back to, I think it's definitely worth most people having some of their own solar panels, even if they're portable and you can take them out into the park if you have an apartment, and a battery bank. You look for something called a battery generator, which is just a big battery that's portable, and a decent size set of solar panels. Even if you lived in an apartment in the city, you could still go out into an open space, lay those things out, and make the water you need from the sun. And you can even bear in mind also that hydroponics, even on a tiny scale, can feed a person really quite remarkably, because plants can take about as much light as you give them. So you can give them up to about 20 hours a day of light, and you can give them light at an intensity that's even brighter than sunlight. So they grow like bilio, and you could miniaturize hydroponic systems down to something pretty darn small so you'd be surprised what you can grow, how quickly. So that's water, food, and energy, to be honest. So then you've got to think about shelter and security, but that's for another day.
This reminds me of the start of the pandemic when I saw a bunch of people in biotech posting, "Hey, this is my shopping cart at Costco. Please take notes, everyone. Things are on the horizon. Let's be careful." And people dismissed it, and then all the toilet paper sold out. So.
Yeah, IKEA sells a simple consumer grade solar solution that would power the atmospheric water collector which is basically just like the classic home water system, but it's pulling the water out of the air rather than from a 5-gallon container. It costs more than the traditional, little, but aesthetically, it looks like a regular home water kitchen solution. But it's you need to power the thing, and Ben's right. The combination of the little consumer IKEA solar system with the atmospheric water generator, you're pretty good, with the exception of food. And then I would encourage you to do a little YouTube search for basement gardens where people are growing farms, enough food to grow in their basements with a little UV light setups. And
yeah, that's the hydroponics.
Yeah, and they're impressive. They're super impressive, and you'll be stunned how.
You can grow shit real fast because plants, as I said, they just take a lot more light then they can just keep taking light. They need about 4 hours a day of rest. Depends on the plant, but after that, you just bathe them in light, and they'll grow like fuck. and their roots don't even have to be in soil, right? They can be in sand with the right nutrients going through the water, and you got no bug problems or anything else. So it's all doable.
And it's you just get a tank, you pour in the nutrients, and connect the little plastic pieces of pipe in the right order, and you'll be very surprised how doable that is. There's, it, even, believe it or not, kids can do it. So it's not an intelligence issue for anybody, I can assure you of that, nor is it really a cost issue for anybody. The most expensive piece of that is the solar consumer thing, which is $4,000 at IKEA. The water atmospheric collector, you're talking hundreds of dollars. The home part we're talking about of growing plants in your basement or any room in your home, honestly, is also in the hundreds of dollars, not thousands of dollars. All of this together, you're under $5,000 for all of it, food, water, and energy, to a level that will at least keep you alive in a zombie apocalypse scenario where your government completely, utterly fails. I know it's $5,000 is not in the reach of everybody, but if your life were dependent on it, and the unfortunate reality is it might be, and you maybe if you start working on that now, you won't have to deal with my nagging nasal voice haunting you as you kill your neighbor for their water. So
I mean, it's only a triple bypass. You only put the money for your triple bypass frappuccino from Starbucks. That's a triple heart bypass, by the way. You just pop that triple bypass frappuccino money in a tin for a couple of years, and you've got the money, right?
Or a year. In the case of my Starbucks habit, you have within a few months.
Yeah.
Hey, Tyler, just usually your audio has been going like up and down, so it's not consistent. So I don't want to let you know.
Sorry about that. Okay, let's run. We're at 11. Let me run through a few more tweets here. Thank you for the notice again. Thomas Tong found this one, that electric EV charging stations for electric cars are becoming more common, but there's still one problem. A California study found that not all of them are working all the time, that many of them are broken. The question is, according to this California study that was just published, what percentage of California Bay Area EV charging stations are inoperable, meaning broken? What percentage of EV?
14%.
Well, hold that thought. Here we go. Tech News Jeopardy. What percentage?
What was the question again?
What percentage of Bay Area, San Francisco, California EV charging station chargers are broken?
30%.
50%.
Is this Tesla?
25%.
33%. 33%.
25%.
45%.
Sharon wins it with
70%.
25%.
Woohoo! Where's Messi? The spirit of Messi is within me.
You're taking everybody out to dinner, Sharon.
The next,
what was the
25%.
Oh, I said 30.
Emmanuel, well, yeah, Sharon said 25%, so she got it right on the nose.
Oh, congratulations.
It's 1 out of 4. That's high.
That's right. Emmanuel Macron jumped on the hot global mic today to remind everybody to not humiliate Putin. Macron tells the EU at a meeting, the French president urged Europe to spare his Russian counterpart from humiliation and told Ukraine it must wait decades to join the EU, while also calling for a new European political community, which Britain could join. But he's warning his EU members not to humiliate Vladimir Putin, because I think he and his advisors have correctly deduced that, being a psychopath as he is, that humiliation is what will get him to push the big red button. And I think they might be right about that.
Plus, he's doing humiliation just fine all on his own.
Yeah, it's very tempting, isn't it? Yeah.
No,
Next.
that's a very true statement. If you compare the revolution of France as compared to the Britain, I mean, was the one factor because of it, the revolution happened in France. Pretty much in Britain, the situation was more or less the same. But that humiliation happened to the French that they were saying, if they don't have the bread, why don't they eat the cake? Kind of a scenario. And that's when that revolution happened. And they took out the journals and checked their hands and saw if it's softened enough, then kill them. So is that humility was the basic criteria for that revolution, of the French Revolution. So he very well knows that. And there's a reason behind it. Probably he's articulating it this way.
Yeah, French know something about revolutions. BB found this one from Reuters. They call it an exclusive that Tesla has now halted most of its output at the Shanghai plant as April sales begin to dive. The Shanghai plant was to produce is now producing fewer than 200 cars on Tuesday, that's today. Plant halted due to supply issues. So get ready for these massive Chinese-based supply chain issues that are going to compound and
Do you think
logjam.
that's
What
going
about
to
the
cause
people
a
that are
price
working
hike?
there?
Is it going to cause a price hike?
I imagine it will result in price hikes in many instances. Sure.
Yeah, the shortage of parts and the delivery is also an issue, both on the ground and on the ocean. So you can see, just like the iPhones or your Macs, the order in March now you can only get them in. I remember it's in August. Yeah, I mean the iPhones. Yeah. So this is gonna happen in Teslas.
So Poppy found one.
There was
Go ahead.
there was also an article maybe 2.5 weeks ago in The Verge about people at Tesla not being able to leave. They have to work 6 12-hour shifts and sleep hot rack like a submarine style, and they don't get to leave. They have to eat and sleep there. What about those people? Did they follow
Yeah,
up on that?
because if the workers leave the factory, they might not be able to come back in a day. So, like, call this as a closed loop management. Thus, otherwise, there's no way to continue this zero COVID policy. So, they ask if you want to restore your manufacturer, you have to ask your worker to stay in the factory. That's for every factory now in Shanghai.
I just wanted that to be acknowledged that these people, even if they're making 200 cars a day in a factory that big, what are they doing with the people?
Okay. Robert also found that article about California Bay Area EV charging stations. So thank you, Robert, for that one. And May found our last one for today from The Guardian about crypto muggings. Thieves in London target digital investors by taking their phones and ostensibly are looking for crypto millionaires and start mugging them to get them to cough up their keys. Ben, where are the plates? Show me your titanium plates.
Hey,
Ben.
I think my ears. Oh, okay. You're on the wallet. Sorry, I was talking to my actual wife for a minute. I know that I shouldn't really do that when tech news is on. But hey, sometimes I default. So yeah, exactly what are they doing? Why are they keeping the crypto on their freaking hot wallet? All those weeks and months I spent running clubhouse rooms telling people how to keep their stuff safe, and they go and do that stupid shit. I don't know. Some people.
Yeah. Well, if you have substantial crypto holdings, you must go through the hygiene of learning how to protect it, which many people are going to fail to do out of perhaps sheer laziness, but in many cases out of just lack of knowledge. But you really should take advantage of Ben's totally brilliant master classes on how to protect yourself. And hopefully those are all now in Clubhouse, you have recorded
Yeah,
them.
they're on. Yeah, exactly. They're on my Clubhouse because I got bored of doing them live, and I'll do them again when the content changes.
Doesn't the president of El Salvador trade crypto on his phone, though? So
Oops.
that's kind of shocking.
It turns out that when you click on a replay of a previous room, that it takes you there. So yes, they're on my Clubhouse profile, but so are loads of tech newses. So I'm just going to go and tidy up my Clubhouse profile. And then if you click on my Clubhouse profile, you'll see all 6 sessions, which kind of go through in proper detail how to do this shit and not get screwed. So with less swearing than I just did. 6 sessions there are.
Ben,
So
are
yeah.
you coming back to doing the Bitcoin rooms?
Well, when something changes, the security protocols haven't changed. So
Nice. Well, it's good to
yeah.
see you back. If you need him up, let me know.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Yeah, when something changes, I'll redo them, but the fundamentals have stayed the same. The security protocols have stayed the same. So yeah, the rooms have stayed the same.
Tyler, by the way, did you see that Kentucky house that was purchased with Bitcoin?
No.
It was a current tweet, so I thought it was quite interesting.
Okay.
I was just in Kentucky yesterday. Interesting.
Okay.
I tweeted it to Tech News Around the World, so.
Okay. I will try and find that. Thank you to everybody for another Tech News Around the World, and we will
Thank you, Tyler.
aim to do it again tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler. See you
Yep.
tomorrow. Bye,
Same
everyone.
bad time, same bad
Thank
channel.
you, Tyler. I think your mic was
Bye,
not on today.
What did you say? Sure.
Yeah, it's still quite low.
Okay. Hopefully better
It's
tomorrow.
okay. Tomorrow we'll test. Yeah.
Okay.
You're